Hello, and I'm back. I'm here. If you're new here, you don't even know who I am, but I'm back. I know what you're thinking. Ben, you got fat. Ben, your hair's too long. Ben, I just couldn't give a shit that you're making videos again. And I respect all of your opinions. And just like I do with every opinion, I reject them all and keep only my own. But where I've been, anything like that doesn't matter. Not in this. Everything looks the same. So we're just going to go into it as if I've never been away. So alas, here it is now. It's my top books of 2021. I know people have like stats, how they did, who they read, spread across how many pages, etc. Personally, I have trouble keeping track of just what I actually read because my brain doesn't comprehend things like that. So when people are able to track the diversity of which they're reading, I have to admit I did watch a couple of videos. Like Angela, Grace, etc. were talking about their stats and their inclusivity of reading. And I scrolled through and I was like, white man, white man, white man, white woman, white man, white man. That's a white man. Asian author, white man. When I was filling out the fantasy where I was kind of diverging into at least a little bit of nuance of inclusivity, I was then reading classics, which is just a fucking cracker fest. So to get into it, number 10, is there going to be a graphic come across? Am I coming back with at least a pretense of editing? I don't know what's going to happen. Number 10 is a split. I've decided that now as I'm recording. The first one is The Shining at number 10. Because out of the Stephen King I read last year, it's 2022 now. Shining was the best in terms of being a concrete, completed narrative. There are ones that I enjoyed aspects of more. Parts of Gerald's Game was so disturbing that I felt like I came out of it a different human being that just couldn't quite trust humanity anymore. There was Misery, which I really enjoyed for its displaying of claustrophobic anxiety, feeling that just having those repeated thoughts of the worst thing possibly happening. I vibe with that so strongly. However, Stephen King is terrible at endings. They just overstay their welcome. This is the only Stephen King book I've read where I feel like it didn't overstay its welcome. It didn't drag on for an extra 80 pages that didn't need to be there. So The Shining, spooky boy, genuinely spooky. Wasn't anticipating it. You know when you read horrors and people are like, oh, I shit myself, I pissed and shit all over the floor, I was so scared. And then you read it and you're like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like Frankenstein. Everyone says Frankenstein's scary. Reading Frankenstein is basically a meme in some ways. It's a great book, but it's a meme. This one actually, there were parts where I was reading it in bed and I was kind of like, I'm chilled to my bones. And I've changed my mind. I was going to split it with Dracula because I have a very nice copy from the Folio Society there. And number 9, we're going with a cheeky classic if you count Dracula as my number 10. And you've got 2 classics. I've got Persuasion by Jane Austen. I read 3 Jane Austen books. I read Persuasion, Northanger Abbey and Pride and Prejudice. I don't think I read any others. And Persuasion was my favourite. It was my first one I read. So that it probably is Pride and Prejudice. But when it's your first one, you kind of like, there's a little vestige of love there. Persuasion, this is a copy I stole from my great aunt. I don't know whether this is meant to be like the colouring or whether some kid got to it and just coloured it in. Couldn't tell you, but it slaps. I always mix up Jane Austen novels. I believe this is the one where she had a relationship with a man. Yeah. So she had a relationship with a man when she was younger. He wanted to propose to her. Her family kind of convinced her that this man is too low of station for you. Fuck him off. Get rid of him. So out he goes. Out he fucks. She's left. She kind of goes on with life. But there's always that lingering desire for this person. And then he rocks back up. I think it's like 9 years later or something. It doesn't say it on here. I think it's like 9 years later. He's now in the Navy, I believe, if I recall. and is of station. And it's her kind of that their rekindling of a romance are will they, won't they, other characters getting involved. Classic Jane Austen with the misinformation. You've got writing men that make you want to punch a hole in a wall and sterilize an entire gender. You can't help but vibe with it sometimes. Persuasion is a banger. Number 8 is Orlando. Orlando, a biography by Virginia Woolf. I got this from a, do you know one of those fucking, where they wrap it up in brown parcel paper and they put like genre, this is what to expect inside of it. And I went there and it said fantasy, and it was like spanning centuries, political intrigue, like all this vibe. And I was like, whoa, that sounds so interesting for a fantasy book. And then you open it and it's Orlando, and it's like, how did you take those elements from Orlando and write it? Because now you're making it sound like it's an epic fantasy, where it is an absolutely mad book. I've done a review on Orlando, I think. Did I do a review on Orlando? I did not do a review on Orlando. Orlando is one of the wildest books I've ever read. It follows, you guessed it, Orlando. The funny thing is, the stuff they had on the parcel paper is the right description. I just resent them. But I'm glad I did read it, because it is a gender-bending, literal century-spanning, wild fucking ride as you follow Orlando as they are, they chase gender halfway through. They go through all these wild experiences. You're seeing them kind of develop and understand about love and their lust and their relationships, and understanding different parts of gender and sadness and misery. It is one of the, it's like a seminal introspection on human misery and the feeling of loneliness and lust. It's all enwrapped in this rich story that also has segments that no matter how many times you read them, you are just like, I understand what is happening. I do not understand what's going on. And it's wild. It's infinitely rereadable, and I love it. Continuing in not having any fantasy books, my number 7 pick is actually one I have a review on, so I'm not going to go into it too much. I don't remember what I even said about it, but Wind Up Bird Chronicle is the second Murakami book I've read. The first one I actually read, and it, as the video is called, it broke me. It was a time in my life where it was just a bit too real, and it's magical realism. So I don't know whether I was living in a fantasy land. I do have severe main character syndrome, so maybe I do live in a fantasy land. Everything I have to say about this book is in the review, so if you are interested, I'd check it out. If not, we'll go into number 6. Number 6 I also have a review on, because I used to make videos, so that kind of fucking makes sense. Number 6 is Guards, Terry Pratchett. This is not the only Terry Pratchett book on the list, because Terry Pratchett he is a goat. He does everything he wants to in his own way and makes it work to such a level that it's insane. I laugh endlessly while listening to, while reading Guards, while reading any Pratchett. I've now read Men at Arms. Men at Arms is also amazing, in some ways better than this book. I would recommend Guards as a starting place for Terry Pratchett. I know people say Mort. I don't vibe with Mort as much. I don't vibe with either. I've read Mort and Reaper Man. I do not like the Death series as much as the City Guard series, or the City Watch series, whatever it's called. I will never stop reading Terry Pratchett. I will never stop loving Terry Pratchett. I don't think anything could possibly... I'm jinxing it. I'm now inviting terrible things to befall my memory of this man. Number 5. This would be the whole of the Long Price Quartet, but specifically, I'm going to go on a limb. I'm going to say it's The Price of Spring. This is the omnibus, which is the last 2 books, An Autumn War and A Price of Spring. I think A Price of Spring, as an encapsulation of the themes of the entire series and the culmination, does it to such a level of perfection that I will always love this series. This will always be one I come back to. I cannot wait to read Age of Ash. I have an arc for it which I'm going to read after I finish the book I'm currently reading. Daniel Abraham constructs, not to rip off Orlando here, he constructs decade-spanning stories. And he does it in a way where every character feels rich. You can spend so little time with a character and feel like you know them and you know exactly where they're going. A character can turn up in the first book and not return until the last. Someone can turn up in the second book and not turn up until the last. And when they return and 25 years, 22 years or whatever it is has gone by, you just pick straight up where you left off and you understand exactly why they're in the position they're in, who they are still the same character. And it's kind of like, do you know when you follow a fantasy series and there's sometimes just those boring stretches where you're like, all you're doing is travelling? This series does away with that. This series is like, imagine if you take a human being's life and let's say that only 4 big events happen that culminate all these humans' lives together. Which is what happens really in actual life. Most of the time it's just generic living, and then there are these absolute lightning bolts of emotion, of events that all culminate at once. And that's what Daniel Abraham is so good at combining and creating, is just the emotion and the feeling of a human being's actual life. Number four is all of Mistborn Era 1. I did a reread. I read this when I was like 14. I remembered everything about it, just not any of the events or any of the times that it happened. I just remembered the feeling of it. So rereading it, I was equally as shocked going through, and it was like reading it for the first time. And in my head, I remember thinking that Well of Ascension was my favourite one when I was younger. But coming into Hero of Ages, the amount of work that's done in this one book, because there's a scaling up, there's a natural scale to this series that is so masterfully done in terms of setting up an event that you, at the time, feels incredible and insurmountable in overthrowing the Lord Ruler. And then the second book elevates that a little, you know, like, whoa, the world has just exploded. It, like the scale, the scope of these books and the world has just exploded. And then you reach the last book, and it gets even larger, and there's a natural progression to it. You don't feel like, oh my god, well this has just gone, that's gone way too far. Like this is unbelievable now. There's a natural build up and scale of these characters and the world and the abilities and their magic that is so believable. I will admit, like everyone says, the prose is Sanderson prose. If you don't like Sanderson prose, you're not going to enjoy Sanderson. But there is the world building and the magic systems, etc. Everything everyone gushes over is right because it's amazing. Number 3 is a binder. Number 3 is The Whole of the Lord of the Rings, which is technically one book if you want to be pedantic about it. Especially since the copy I'm using here is just one book. The actual copies I read are over there. I don't know whether it's in shop, but they're broken up into the 6 individual tiny books, which made the reading experience so much better. Because there are natural breaks for there to be 6 books in terms of switching character perspectives and etc. and events. So there are so many different ways you can read Lord of the Rings. Do whatever you fucking want. I don't need to explain why this book's amazing. It's Lord of the Rings. I'm not even going to actually say anything about it, because genuinely, who needs to hear another person say that Lord of the Rings is amazing? One thing I will make a note of, having just talked about Brandon Sanderson and Tolkien, is that I read the first 3 books of The Wheel of Time last year, and towards the end of last year, and they slapped. They're not on this list because I don't believe any of the books are better than the books on this list. I think that, kind of like the Long Price Quartet, it's an encapsulation of a whole. The Long Price Quartet has problems in each book, but the culmination of all 4 put together creates a complete masterpiece. And I think that will be the case with The Wheel of Time, is that I don't think any of these books have been perfect so far. They all have gripes where I read it, I'm like, God, I'm not going to spoil anything. I was going to give a specific detail about the second book because one of them sticks in my head and it makes me want to drive my head into a wall. But I still gave that book 5 stars, 9 out of 10, because the rest did so much work and I really enjoyed it. I've just given a review of the fucking Wheel of Time there, but the point is that if you've read Brandon Sanderson and Tolkien and you're scared about reading the Wheel of Time because it's so long, one of the best experiences I had reading last year was actually reading The Eye of the World and picking up the feel you have of Tolkien, the kind of the more poetic way that Jordan narrates, and the poetry he kind of flows into it, the colourful use of the flowery nature of his prose, and then you have the kind of the story build up and the feel that Brandon Sanderson has. And it was such an interesting meeting of two roads, of like the old and the new, and reading that interim, that the kind of the stepping stone that took them from one to the other. And so anyone that wants to experience that, I would recommend just reading The Wheel of Time. Number two was the biggest surprise of the year. Yeah, I think this was the biggest surprise in terms of, I was surprised by Wind Up Bird Chronicle, I was surprised by Orlando in different ways. This was one where I just didn't expect to get the depth of emotion that I did, because it's a collection of short stories, and I also have a review on this. Ted Chiang's Exhalation has pull quotes from Barack Obama and Alan Moore, which is that's the duality of man right there. So if you have a reason to pick this book up, just know that quite literally the opposites of human beings will enjoy this book, apparently. I spoke about it because I've read it so long ago now. I've also read a second collection, Stories of Your Life and Others, which is the story that Arrival's based on. I've read them so long ago now, in terms of, I didn't read them that long ago, but my brain has just, I don't have the words to describe what happened in this. Whereas when I just experienced it, I was way more in depth and gave my opinions. This was my only sci-fi of the year as well, these two collections. So for someone that doesn't read any sci-fi apparently, which is just a shame, this still turned out to be my second best book of the year. And if I was being honest, the top book of the year is purely for sentimental reasons. So this should technically be my favourite read of the year, if I was being honest, but I'm a filthy, dirty liar. And number one, I told you there was going to be another Terry Pratchett book on this list, and it's here, my favourite book of the year. This is a spicy edition that Grace lovingly got me. Going Postal was my first Terry Pratchett book, hence the sentimentality. And the kind of having the nice edition, it just means a lot to me. Going Postal opened up a whole new avenue to writing that I'd never even thought about before. I don't think I've ever laughed as much out loud at a book. I looked insane reading it. I was reading this disgusting old copy that was, there was like a show copy. I'll probably put up on screen. It was ratty as hell, and I must have looked insane chuckling to myself over this book in public. Like, people looked at me, and I understand, because I must have looked insane. It was the best. It follows Moiswan Litvig as he is sentenced to death as a thief. He has I think you can guess what he did, but he has been sentenced to death by Vetinari, the leader of this city, Ankh-Morpork. And after his sentencing, let's just say, something happens where it turns out that he, rather than being hung, ends up in charge of the post office of the city, and he has to reprise it, dig it up from the depths of being completely ignored, and make it work again. And you're following this shuckster, this absolute despicable, selfish charlatan, this guy that has been ripping off people his entire life, as he tries to make the post office work, because if he doesn't, Vetinari will get rid of him. It's so endearing. It does so much work to make you like this just terrible person. And the prose is just, it was at a point in Pratchett's career where he was effortlessly him. Like the way I describe it is, because I've never done a review on Going Postal. The opening of this book, he is taken up to be hung, and he starts having a dialogue with the hangman, and he's like, you know, I don't really see why we do this. It doesn't seem like this is helping with crime at all. You know, you're still in the job, like you're hanging all these people, but people are still stealing. Like, is this really having that big of an effect? And this kind of like this hangman's going along with him. It's kind of like, well, I can see what you mean. I am busy. Like, I do this a lot, and I suppose there does come a point where you have to question: is this beneficial in the long run? Should we be trying to reform these people and then have them teach others not to be like they were, or is it working the other way? And Moist von Litwig said, like, well, if you're having these questions, maybe you could let me go. Maybe you shouldn't hang me. And then the hangman just like has a one-off line where he's just like, we'll say one thing though. Never had the same person up here twice. It's just such a wonderful, stupid joke that had me laughing for so long, where it took me by surprise, because I never experienced Pratchett before, didn't quite know what to expect. I knew it was meant to be funny, but things are meant to be funny and aren't, or aren't meant to be funny and are. Like, I didn't know how the humour was going to hit. And that's my list done. I've been talking for fucking ages. I forgot what it was like. Fucking trying to keep control of how much you talk. I've had a lot of opinions to hold in. You know what it's been like? When you used to spewing at a camera for like 20 minutes at a time, and then you stop doing it for like almost 2 months. I've had to talk to myself in my head. I've been like, I think this is quite good about this book. And then I've replied to myself in my own head, like, yes, I thought that part was also quite successful, and I think I was going crazy. So I'm coming back. The final thing, if anyone's made it this far, I'm coming back with no expectations, the same way I did the first time. If people watch, I thank you wholeheartedly. We're almost at 1,000 subs, which is an insane number. I do not think anyone's going to come back from the first time I made videos, because honestly, I imagine it's some kind of, they'll come out of it and they'll realise, what the fuck was I doing watching him? So, understandable. I will be making skits, I will be making reviews. I have an idea for a series I'm going to start doing, which is in the works. I'm waiting for books to arrive to start reading and review. That's really it. Just new year, new me, guys. I'm going to be the exact same.